Why are you afraid of music theory? No, really, like, why though? I'm making this video partly because of some like actual conversations that I've had with fellow musicians, like songwriters and instrumentalists and producers, where they've expressed a disillusionment with music theory, which on one end is just like a simple indifference, but on the other can be like an actual hostility, like an animosity toward music theory and everything that it apparently stands for. I think a lot of you have the wrong idea about music theory, because I can guarantee you the theory will make you a better musician no matter what style of music that you make, and I mean it. It feels crazy to even have to say that, but I think it's a mindset thing, and I hope to communicate how I see it. Theory will not corrupt your musical intuition. It will deepen it, and you will be a greater artist as a result. It is something to take seriously and not shy away from, and it doesn't have to be a drag. But I'll have to break this down gradually. I'm Sezno. I'm a 25-year-old songwriter and producer.
I submit to a contest, I burn tiny desks. I'm obsessed with the grind, I'm insane, I suppose.
Sezno is a solo project, so I do everything myself. I compose the music, I write the lyrics, I track, I mix. Yada yada. And now, at this point, I play a number of instruments. My earliest was piano, but the big one in my life so far has been guitar. I also play the electric bass in my songs, and I'm okay on drums. And I can read music. But, and this is part of the overarching point that I'm making here, my saying that I can read music is not intended as a flex, and there's no need for anybody to ever interpret it as such, because being able to read music does not make me better than anyone else. It's a skill that I've worked to obtain because for my own personal long-term goals, it's a skill that I've determined that I need to have. I've been making music for about a decade, and over the years, I've come to be a music theory nerd, in the sense that I love it. I'm fascinated by it, and I've spent a lot of time exploring it. Without question, theory has deepened my relationship to music, and it has exponentially broadened the music that I can personally come up with. There are songs that I've written in my 20s that would have been impossible for me to write when I was 17 because there were relevant theoretical concepts that I wasn't aware of yet, and later on, my better awareness of those concepts led me to be able to write those songs. I've only taken one semester of proper music theory, and it was at a community college when I was 19. But I've spent a lot of time studying music history and music theory on my own time at a quasi-academic level, and I've grown a deep love for classical music of all eras. I have numerous scores and books on all sorts of topics relating to it. I guess I collect them. There's no shame in that. Should I show you some of my books? I might as well. I have a lot of books on classical music that are like, if you know, you know. I have a Rimsky-Korsakov's book on orchestration. I have Yepeson's book on Palestrina style. I have Bukowski's book on Baroque music. These are all generally academic books, but the information that's in them is a gold mine to me. And I kind of need it at this point for my creative process. I want my music to pick and choose from the history of music. And my academic approach, I guess, enables me to understand that history better. Yo, also, I'm speaking to the Renaissance nerds right now. If any of you know of a one-volume book on Akagem, please comment. I don't care how dense it is, I can handle it. Don't get me wrong though, in your journey with theory, like, you don't have to be interested in any of this shit. Music theory is a deep field of study, and different pockets will be relevant to you depending on what you want to do. I'm gonna break this down into like several main points, each of which is associated with an assumption that I've observed in other people about theory that I believe to be false or misguided. Let's begin with a really big one, which is that theory doesn't write your songs for you. I am appalled when people say that they avoid music theory because it would hinder their creativity. As if theory would corrupt this like innate authenticity that you have, that is divine and winged and cannot be held down by the bourgeoisie and their rules. This take has definitely permeated our musical culture in a big way, and some major figures have championed it. One that comes to mind for me is Kurt Cobain, in that famous Nirvana interview on The Balcony from '93, so they were a household name at this point. The interviewer asks Kurt Cobain if he considers himself more a songwriter or a guitarist. He answers songwriter and proceeds to say, verbatim, "I have no desire to become any better of a guitar player. I'm not into musicianship at all. I don't have any respect for it, I just hate it. To learn how to read music or to understand arpeggios and Dorian modes and all that stuff is just a waste of time. It gets in the way of originality. Look, I love Nirvana and I've admired Kurt Cobain for many years, but straight up, this is just like a boneheaded ass take, and I'll explain why. I will give him some credit because this response, to me, seems consistent with how he carried himself and the messages that he wanted to transmit. He's clearly advocating for the mentality of DIY art here. Like, don't listen to the rich and the professors, carve your own path, seek inspiration and originality within yourself. Like, punk rock shit, like, I get it. That's the ethos that changed my life, and I advocate for it as well. We live today more in Kurt Cobain's world than in Beethoven's in terms of the cultural expectations around the skill set of a musician. Kurt exerted a huge influence over the culture in inspiring people to do it themselves, no matter what your skill level, down with the status quo. But this man said he had no respect for musicianship at all, and that reading music or understanding theory is a waste of time. You can only get so far with this attitude. Theory can evolve your musical intuition, but it will not destroy it. It will not get in the way of originality if you don't let it, which is very easy to do. I personally think he was coming at this from a view that many people have today that associates music theory with rules, with do's and don'ts, and this idea that there are such things as right and wrong in music. For many people, theory is associated with academia and with institutions that are imposing their own standards on art, sometimes in an exclusionary or bigoted way. As an artist, like, you gotta be aware of these things. The potential repercussions of dogma and manipulation and the politicization of music. But to write off the entire field of study, bro? Because of the ways that it's sometimes gotten used throughout history? That's completely absurd. And it's counter to the purpose that theory is supposed to serve in the first place. Theory is not prescriptive, it is descriptive. It is not telling you what to do. It describes for you what people have done. It's information, not propaganda. Theory doesn't write your songs for you. It is a simple description in its own language of musical concepts that seemingly are a part of this universe and the way we perceive things as humans. Something natural that we don't have real control over. Like, a perfect fifth is always a perfect fifth, and there are very natural reasons why it sounds the way that it does. If the ratio of the vibrations was different, it wouldn't be a perfect fifth anymore. It would be something else that has a different name. And depending on what you're writing, a fifth has a million different uses. If you play power chords on guitar, you're writing in fifths. It's just a concept in your toolbox as a writer and a maker and a thinker. And it's up to you to make what you want with it. There are centuries of history in Western music theory. The music that theorists have talked about over the years changes greatly from century to century. What seems to be the through line among all of it, though, is that theoretical works were written to describe practices that musicians were already doing. The music and the techniques that are in that music didn't come from the theory books. The music was already getting written, and theory books are interpretations of that music, made later. People think that theory will hinder because it makes you privy to a supposedly correct way of doing things, and that you can never go back, and that all of your art will become conformist and inauthentic. When you're writing a song, there's always more than one option for the musical details of every instant of that song. Different moments require you to deploy different options. You might think that theory will sterilize you into choosing the right option every time, but the only right option that actually exists is the one that you think sounds good. You shouldn't have to use a 5-1 at the end of your chord progression because a textbook told you so. You should use it if that's what you hear in your head. Say you don't hear a 5 before the 1. Music theory can help you explore other options. What if you replace the 5 with a 4? Or a minor 4? Or a flat 6? That may sound like Greek to some of you, but I promise it's not complicated. And once you know what those are, you become sensitive really fast to how different they actually sound in real life. And you'll come to a point where you'll be making music, you'll hear a chord in a given context, and you'll know immediately if it's the right one or not. Do you ever agonize over your notes? Do you ever come up with some cool chords, but you have trouble coming up with a melody on top? Do you ever get frustrated when you have a great verse and a great chorus, but you can't come up with a bridge? Theory can help you with all of these things. It's a huge source of tools for your toolbox, and it will make you more confident in what you do. Now, you personally might not think it can help you because of X, Y, and Z. But the next point I want to make is that music theory is relevant to all of us. Look, we all have different skill sets these days as musicians. Some of us play an instrument, others don't. Not every rapper makes beats, not every beat maker raps. Given that we all do different things, it's easy to conclude, like, theory won't be useful for my project. You can't pin me down because that's how different I am. A theory is often thought of as advocating like one specific set of musical skills for the composition and performance of one specific style of music. And the impressions are that it's the study of this like old, archaic music that is not really relevant to today's concerns. This attitude of like, why should I care how harmony works if I make punk or trap or gent? Just because you don't write classical music, and you know, most of us don't, it does not at all mean that the theory won't be of any use to you. Because the concepts themselves are way bigger than just classical music. Like, as one instance, like, I hate to break it to you, but like, if you're a songwriter and you've written in a major key, then you probably used a lot of the same chords that Mozart did when he wrote in major. For some passages, probably in the exact same order. If you've ever played C, G, C in your life, then you are speaking a phrase that was part of Mozart's vocabulary. This is kind of similar to how when people talk to each other in English, they quote Shakespeare and use words that he invented, but a lot of us like don't even realize it. Except we don't think of our music as ripping off Mozart, even though we use the same chords that he did. This is because we have our own concerns. The ideas that we bring to music change over time. That's what makes the history of music possible. But the physical laws of music are really always the same. So, theory is relevant to every generation of musicians because it is the study of those laws. The study of the things that never change in music. Whether you like it or not, you have inherited a tradition or multiple traditions that are way bigger and way older than you. And you have ingrained musical habits that come from those traditions. All of our expectations about music are formulated by what we've heard before, which is the music of the past. What matters is how a generation puts their knowledge of the past into practice in the present. There's always things that are undiscovered. You know, the music of the future doesn't exist yet, but the framework in which everything exists hasn't really changed. Mozart had to solve the same problems as us. What's a good intro? What's a good melody? What chord should go right there? How do I bring in this rhythm? And knowing even a little bit about how Mozart solved his problems, or anybody else, it can be of great use to you when you're solving yours. Like, I'll put it this way. All of my thinking about the history of music has made me conclude that people have always loved a good beat and a good tune. And that's not going to change anytime soon. And we think of old music as being like super cliched and finished, when in reality it can be very surprising and enjoyable in the same ways that we find music of today enjoyable. Like, you don't have to reinvent harmony to make good music. We can still use the same chords that Mozart did, but the difference is that we use them to make music that Mozart could never dream of. Imagine Mozart making hyperpop or something. You know? Also, Mozart wasn't the first person to use those chords either, but he found a use for them that made sense to him, and the resulting music was very different from what came before him. In that sense, we're in the same boat as him. There's all kinds of insight, and it's just like out there for the taking, because music theory really has no gatekeeping power anymore. That's kind of an intense statement. I'll try to explain what I mean. Basically, we live in a golden age of information, and we're very lucky. We have unprecedented access to the music of right now and all the music of the past. If you could time travel to the distant past, the resources that we have now would blow people's minds. We pay a small subscription fee to a streaming service, and we suddenly have access to all the great discographies of recorded music. Any specific song that you can think of by millions of artists, dead or alive. YouTube is another gold mine. Some of my favorite albums, I listened to them for the first time as a full album video that somebody posted on YouTube. I didn't have to seek out the record and go buy it. I definitely didn't have to like buy the sheet music and learn to play it myself. This same thing goes for information about music theory, information about being a better composer, being a better musician. Like, it's easier now than ever to tap in. It's like so easy that it's like, why wouldn't you? There are lots of fascinating videos on YouTube exploring like any topic that you can think of, made by professional people with like insight and experience. People that talk about this stuff because they sincerely care about it and they want you to know about it. Everyone benefits from artists being the best that they can be. Earlier in history, theory and the study associated with like becoming classically trained led to people associating it with the bourgeoisie. And, you know, in a world that has like punk rock and hip hop and grindcore, like, many of us don't like that shit. Theory is highbrow, it's expensive, it's for the wealthy, it's not for the people, and it's a bad joke that you don't want to be in on anyway. But those very mechanisms of gatekeeping have lost all their power in recent years as information has advanced to the internet. Like, simply, like, you don't have to pay for a music degree to learn this stuff anymore. Kind of a hot take, but I believe that you could learn just as much online as would earn you a real-life music degree for a fraction of the cost. The music kids might go after me on that, but, you know, whatever. The internet is also foolproof in the sense that there's content out there that's meaningful for every skill level. There's like super niche advanced stuff, and there's also like super introductory basic stuff, and of course everything in between. What this gives you is like the immense freedom to just like explore whatever you want. Every genre and style has these passionate practitioners that want to pass down its secrets to the next generation. You want a breakdown of the rhyme schemes in a song by Nas? You want an analysis of the chords in the main theme of your favorite video game soundtrack? You want a demonstration of different guitar licks that you can play over a 12-bar blues? My earnest advice is just educate yourself on what interests you. I've found many amazing YouTube creators over the years that focus on all sorts of topics. Some on classical, some on jazz, some on rock, some on metal. So if you write music, if you're a poet with notes, why would you prevent yourself from insight into your own language? The language that you're writing poems in. You see what I'm saying? I think if you're clever and if you're curious, you'll find connections in unlikely places. Maybe the deeper you go, the more you realize everything is connected, and that the major genres of today are really not all that different from each other.